Over the past 2 years, our university has witnessed white supremacist propaganda, most notably a banner placed on our library for the entire campus to see, student arrests after standing up for what they thought was right, the first ever impeachment of a student government president in the school's history, that same student government president calling for the defunding of our student-run newspaper, and more. In regards to diversity and inclusion, our school was founded in 1899. And over the last 2 years that I've been here, our student government, major dance team, and newspaper, which was founded in 1911, are just now placing Black leaders at the head of those organizations. In fact, I'm the only second Black editor-in-chief in our newspaper's history. So for as many steps as we've taken forward, a lot of work still needs to be done. Our publication has a duty to understand that history, channel it, and serve our audience. You must understand that diversity is not just hiring diverse people, it's also covering the issues and topics plaguing underrepresented communities and doing so in a way that it resonates with our audience, especially those who don't look like us. Our newsroom is taking steps in the right direction in regards to placing diverse people in leadership positions. We've been present throughout all of the trials and tribulations our campus has faced. I think the next logical step for our newsroom is to understand why all of these things matter. In student media, you often get people who are going through the motions, not understand why we're doing what we're doing. These students know controversial developments need to be covered. In fact, they're being told that it needs to be covered. But I feel that our organization is missing the why part. We're missing the true meaning of what diversity, inclusion, and public discourse mean. It isn't just necessary in our coverage, it's even more imperative that we begin to think in diverse ways, ways that challenge traditional ways of thinking. As one of the very few Black leaders in our organization, I shouldn't have to have conversations with white colleagues about the plight of African Americans and how centuries of oppression keep people within our communities from reaching their full potential. I shouldn't have to have white women in leadership positions tell me that white women have historically been more oppressed than Black men. It's embarrassing and it's ridiculous. It shows me that we aren't where we need to be, and the lack of knowledge is rooted in some of the things I know this program will cover, such as public discourse. These traditional ways of thinking have an impact on how we cover our audience. If we don't work to understand them, we're doing everyone a disservice. This project will be fully implemented over the summer or as soon as it's made available. I plan for myself, the editor-in-chief, our faculty advisor, our student publications coordinator, and our managing editor to take charge of ensuring that we're sticking to a weekly schedule. I think it's imperative that while we transition from one leadership team to another, we're able to focus on the foundational pillars every newsroom should have. The goal would be to commit a few hours to this project a week. Specifics would just depend on what's offered and made available. Under these unfortunate circumstances, we obviously wouldn't be able to meet in person, but I require our team conduct meetings over Zoom, hold conference calls, and use any other available time slots to discuss it all. We'd also incorporate time into our already scheduled meetings to discuss the project. This includes budget meetings, which are twice a week, and individual section and department meetings once a week. During this pandemic, we're not printing, we're a digital daily. I don't see this project throwing us off our schedule. It's a matter of working around the things we already have in place and making time for it. When we get back to some form of normalcy, we'll form a new plan of action. I'll be interested in talking with you all to provide even more detail once we find out the project's logistics. I can assure you that we'll dedicate the time necessary. I really believe our organization would benefit from this program, and as I stated before, over the last couple of years, we've taken steps in the right direction. We've been present throughout all of the trials and tribulations. The next logical step is teaching our staff why these things matter, why it's important to work to understand the people and groups we're covering. Every newsroom talks about diversity, inclusion, public discourse, and more, but very few understand what those things mean. It is so important to me that before I leave this organization in the next year, that I'm able to place a helping hand in pushing us in that direction. We have people who care about journalism. We have people who will go through hell and back to make sure that things are covered accurately, timely, and fairly. Now it's time to transform the way we think about these issues and integrate what we learn into our ways of thinking. I think in the long run, it'll be reflected in our coverage. We'll have a publication that places people, meaningful action, and creative composition at the forefront of everything we do. So, greetings to everybody in attendance, and welcome to the University Star Presents Reflecting on the 11% Project. See, what I just read to you is my submission letter to the Poynter Institute, which works with multiple student newsrooms each year on what it calls the College Media Project. This year, Poynter selected the University Star as one of 10 newsrooms to take part in the project, focusing on bolstering the college newsroom presence on college campuses. Once we were selected, we attended training during the summer to figure out exactly what journey we would embark upon, this next school year. We had free range to do anything we wanted. Some staff members wanted to do a project focused on COVID-19. Others wanted to work on something related to the 2020 general election, but the number 11 always stood out. And we were aware of Texas State's Black student demographic on campus and always wondered why the number remained around the same, 11%, in the years I've been here. That number transformed into what we know now as the 11% Project, an examination, a year-long examination of Black students at Texas State through history, election, hometowns, activism, creatives, and 10 years from now. We used each month throughout the school year to focus on one specific theme, as we called it. That resulted in an exhaustive timeline, an editorial, a 5-part audio series titled Language of the Unheard, a video documentary titled Hometowns, an 8,000-word story exploring how activism at Texas State left Black students with trauma after graduation, years after graduation, a social media campaign to highlight Black creatives who we say are doing the damn thing, and a video which will soon be released featuring Black students speaking on what they see as the future of this institution. Our staff at the Star has learned so much working on this project, and we hope that you have too. And if you haven't, we hope that you will. This event will feature dialogue that we hope will push the needle and move things at this university forward. You will witness 2 separate roundtable discussions with Black students and faculty with short videos from Black Texas State, as we love to call it, in between. The first roundtable will focus on the past, present, and future, while the second will feature a reflection on the project with Black staff members at the Star. So once again, thank you so much for attending. Without further ado, here is Lift Every Voice and Sing from some remarkable students, Jada Ennis, Chloe Lewis, and Tremaine Perkin. When the short video concludes, we will begin our first roundtable discussion. Enjoy.
Every voice I see, till
Turn up the volume.
All liberty, let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas.
Sing a song full of the hope that the dark past has taught us.
Sing a song full of the hope that our present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 11% Roundtable, past, present, and future. In this portion of the event, we're going to be discussing various aspects of Texas State University and how they relate to its Black student population with Black faculty and students. To accompany this discussion, we have 4 wonderful panelists. Dr. Vincent Morton, Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Dr. Lori Fluker, Associate Dean of the College of Fine Arts and Communication and Associate Professor of Student of Journalism and Mass Communication. We have Evan Bookman, NAAC Unit 6875B President and Black Men United Senior Student Advisor. And we have Cree Taylor, Texas State NAACP Secretary and Women Empowerment Chair. How are all you doing this evening?
Great.
Great.
Good.
Good. So the way we're gonna do this discussion is I'm going to ask you all a question and I'm gonna allow either faculty or students to answer it first. And then once faculty or students have answered first, the floor will be open to the opposite party. So for our first question that we have, so over the past 6 years, Black enrollment at Texas State has been steady around 10 to 11%. Why do you think Texas State University hasn't gotten more enrollment among Black students? And I'll allow faculty to answer first.
Would you like to go first, Dr. Fluker?
I'm sorry, say it again, Vince.
I said, would you like to go first?
I can certainly do that. I've been at Texas State since 1989, and I have seen the progression. However, I have not seen the targeted interest in African American students. I believe we do a great job recruiting African American students in Dallas and Houston, but I think it requires a little bit more when we're talking about recruiting students of color, and specifically African American students. I think the issue is that in many instances, we have to not only recruit the students, but recruit the families. I think the families are heavily invested in the success of their children going to school and being successful. And I question whether Texas State and many other institutions have gone that extra mile to ensure that we do just that. Another problem that I've seen is during a period of time, Texas State, along with many other institutions across the country, had a targeted interest in becoming an Hispanic serving institution. I think that what we might have done during that period of time, because we were on the increase in terms of African American student population when that interest came our way. And I think what we did was we probably put more emphasis on becoming an Hispanic serving institution without actually telling our African American students that they in fact mattered as well. And so I've seen over time that we've tried to overcome that, but we've got to do more. We've got to dig in. And I know that we've got Gary Ray and others who are doing just that, the recruitment office. But I think one of the things that we might want to do more is taking African American faculty and staff on the road, perhaps in many instances, so that families can see that their children will have role models to look up to.
So I'm in agreement with Dr. Fluker. I too came to Texas State in 1989, and the question reflects back on the previous 6 years, but I think what she gave some historical context that helped the discussion. I can also say back in the early 90s or whatever, there were initiatives that were taken on by Black faculty and staff. I deal really intentionally through the coalition of Black faculty and staff, where we were assisting in some of the initiatives. And as I look at Ebbing, I can reflect back on the NAACP. There were times when we would actually sponsor bands, and we would go out and reach out to those African American schools that were in the Austin ISD area, a few that were in San Antonio, and where the students went out and recruited. And so there were some initiatives that we took on. But going back to what Dr. Fluker said is that we also talked as a coalition is that needed to be something that was institutionalized. And so we needed to be intentional on the focus of how we were recruiting and speaking about recruiting families and understanding the dynamics of the Black family. But fast forward to where we are now is in the previous 6 years, it's no secret that there's been a lot of unrest. A lot of the reasons legitimate in terms of what we see here in San Marcos, in Texas, and in America. And it's impacted the students and students who want to come here. Back in those 90s and whatever, the strong community was a lot about each one teach one, I am my brother's keeper, things of those types of efforts that made you want to reach out and bring individuals to Texas State. I don't think that sentiment is the same right now. Students question their experience at Texas State. And so when you're going back home and you're talking to those individuals that attended the same high schools and live in your same neighborhoods, those conversations are different. And so in looking at where we are in the previous 6 years compared to where we were back in the early 90s and beyond, it's just a different time and place.
And if I could add one more thing to that, Kim, Dr. Morton is absolutely correct. In the 90s, when I arrived at Texas State as an assistant professor, you could count the number of Black faculty members on one hand. And I'd like to give a shout out to the 3 who were stalwart members of that. Brother Kenny Tucker, Doctors Elvin Holt and Naaman Thomas. And on the staff side, we had James Scott and Edwin Miles. And that core group of people had in mind to create a coalition of Black faculty and staff to do just what Dr. Morton had in mind, which was to have a system in place that allowed us to get more role models on campus, that allowed us to become more active in Black students' lives. And that's how the Coalition of Black Faculty and Staff were begun. I'd also like to say that, you know, we were really successful getting that off the ground. And that when Dr. Trouth got here, she also brought forward a program called Target of Opportunity that allowed different departments to hire Black faculty and staff or faculty of color if there was an interest and if the person was qualified. And almost overnight, our numbers increased substantially. I think we have a way to go. There's no question in my mind that we have a way to go in terms of upper administration. We do fine in faculty, we do fine in staff, but we're not really represented well in terms of upper administration. The administration has done a great job of promoting women and white women specifically, but we have not done as good a job in promoting Black administrators. Let me say one more thing. That is the reason that we've been successful at having to cope with some of these issues that Dr. Morton alluded to. If we did not have this core group of faculty and staff as role models for students to come and talk to, I think we'd have even fewer than the 10 to 11% that we're talking about now. So I think it's incumbent upon the institution to continue to recruit Black faculty and staff and administrators, and in addition, Black students.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Creo or Evan?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I kind of agree with Dr. Fluker in recruiting Black students. When I grew up in San Antonio, so I grew up a lot around predominantly white schools or Hispanic schools. And so all my Black friends I did grow up with made it a point to go to an HBCU because they didn't get that growing up. And I decided to go to UT. And when I transferred to Texas State, it really was because of the criminal justice program. So when I got here, I was actually surprised to see 11% of the population to be Black students, because at UT it was even lower. However, I do think when the students get here, the university doesn't always take it upon themselves to show that they are valued individuals on campus. And I think even on social media is such a big thing nowadays, especially with the movements we see across the country. On our university social medias, we don't make it a point to attract Black students by highlighting Black organizations or Black sororities or Black things going on, unless it so happens to be Black History Month, like something where it feels like it needs to be done, where I feel like it needs to be a constant thing of making a point to show not just Black students, but all students of color that they are valued on this campus, especially if we are essentially 51% minority students.
Anything you'd like to add, Evan?
Oh yeah, I agree with everything that was said. I don't believe there's like a holistic approach in terms of, seeking out Black students or Black faculty and staff. I know for me, I enrolled in Texas State in 2016. I know I had a cousin that graduated the summer before and another cousin that graduated a few years before. So that was kind of like my original link to Texas State. Like other than that, it was just me, going to college to simply get like a higher education. And since then, like everyone on here has alluded to, the social media aspect, the lack of hiring and retention of Black faculty and staff, and even the departments that, Black faculty are in, like you'll be lucky to get, more than one or two. So I just think there needs to be a better approach in terms of recruiting students and retaining Black faculty and staff.
And can I also add, specifically as a criminal justice major, I have seen a wave of my Black peers wanting to be lawyers and wanting to get involved in criminal justice or policing. And I do feel like there's the potential for this university to attract students like that want to make change, not just on campus, but out in the real world. They just need to make it a point to do that, a priority, essentially.
That's a great segue into our next point, because my next question was going to be, how do you think having Black faculty around campus and as professors has impacted both Black and non-Black students? And I'll allow the students to answer first, and then we'll go on to the faculty.
Want to go first, Cree?
You go first.
For me, I mean, meeting Dr. Morden, seeing Dr. Fluker, so many different, professors, staff, Dr. Ben, Dr. Fitzpatrick, like all of them, they're like, they're my mentors basically. Like 2-3 years ago, like I wasn't as involved on campus. Like I was just like going to classes, going back to my dorm and stuff. But like, they really been like my mentors, basically. And like, they're also, my advisors to some of my student organizations. So they really keep me grounded, they fill me in what's going on campus. And they just made my college experience all the more worthwhile.
I think having Black teachers, I've only had growing up, I only had one Black teacher in my life. And this semester is actually the second I ever had. I had Dr. Goldstone. Having a teacher like her made me feel heard for once, because growing up, I actually envied the relationship white students have with white teachers, because there's almost a different type of comfortability that they had. And I always wanted a close relationship with my teachers. So now I have that same bond with Dr. Goldstone, and I understand almost what it's like from the white perspective of having a teacher that looks like you and feeling comfortable to approach them about things and talk to them about things and talk to them from the Black perspective. It really made a difference. And especially for non-Black students, I think it gives them another sense of perspective, because now they're in class and they're reading all Black authors and not just slave stuff, but stuff where it's like coming of age stories, pop culture. I really think it's important for people to have different perspectives in a bunch of different cultures in order to really understand the world, because I think that's how people end up so sheltered and ignorant, where ignorance is bliss, is like they never had to even deal with it because it was never kind of put in their face and in their classroom. It was never made to seem important. So, yeah.
I'll go ahead and go next. I think it's critical. In non-COVID years, I teach hundreds of students, almost 800 students every year. And many of those students have never had an African-American professor. And that's my students of color, that's white students, that's regardless. And so I think it's critical that they see for themselves that, first of all, somebody who looks like them can make it. And that means that they can make it also. And I think for my students who are not students of color, they need to understand that the world is a lot more diverse than it was many years back. And I think this new generation of students understand that. I'm proud to say that I've taught Jaden. I've taught his predecessor, who served as the University Star editor. And you could tell in those classes that these were the rising stars, not just at Texas State, but when they get out of there. And so my students who are not students of color get a chance to not only see faculty who are role models for them, for example, they get a chance to see their fellow students who don't fit the stereotypes. As a matter of fact, my first day of class, we tackle stereotypes. and we talk about what do you know about given populations based on what you've seen in the media, what you've seen in your own personal lives, and we tackle it head on because I want them to understand from day one, this is what people say about me and about others. Can't speak English. I'm the person who's going to help you understand English. So we battle those stereotypes, and we do it throughout the semester. And I think it's critical that they see me, that they see Dr. Morton, that they see Dr. Ben, that they see Dr. Just all of us who represent what all the things that they haven't seen before, and they see it right in front of their faces. And I think it's beneficial to everyone.
You know, I just had a conversation similar to this with a colleague on Monday, I think it was, after we concluded the Life Anew program. And we were talking about making ourselves available to students, but also sometimes I think it seems as though it's a cliche to say people need to see someone that looks like them. And I gave the analogy that it was a real diverse room in terms of I'll just say race that was we were on the 11th floor, but I gave the scenario. So when a student comes in, and I was reflecting back on what Evan was saying when he first came in, if a student comes in and all of us want to make ourselves available to that individual, well, he doesn't know us. Who do you think he's going to gravitate towards? It's going to be someone that he feels familiarity with, and it's up to them to determine that. And sometimes well, here's a black guy over here, I'm going to go and ask that guy. Now, the dynamics could change. If you're looking for the ladies' room and you're a lady, you may not come to me. But, you know, we talked about when you hear this saying that I don't see color. My response was, well, I always see color. But I think that becomes part of the conversation that we have as people of color. So when you have someone like Evan that comes in and say, you know, I'm just going to school and I'm not that engaged. Well, that's sort of natural, but he started to get his legs under him. He started to have individuals where he can go to, like a Dr. Fluker, and have a conversation and become comfortable being able to discuss and talk about those things that impact him. And so, you know, there becomes this difference when he uses the terms interchangeably, mentors and advisors, but we're also friends. But the other part of that reality is, as Black men and women, we can say things to you that nobody else may not say. And so, you know, there were times when I know Terrence and I had the African American Male Dialogue Series, which was generated out of the Coalition of Black Faculty Staff out of concerns of African Americans, males and what have you. And those students, we may be around and we see on campus, you could see sometime when they're talking, here comes TP. Here comes, at that time, Mr. Morton, and they'd pull their pants up and they'd straighten their shirts or whatever, because if they didn't, we're coming, hey, pull your pants up, you know, what are you doing now? Someone else. They couldn't say that to those individuals. So I say that to say that when you have someone, and I'm just responding to what Evan says, is that you become comfortable. Those concerns that you have are legitimate concerns, and I think what Dr. Fluke and our colleagues try to do is make sure that we're available to you to talk through those processes. Sometimes you're angry and you have a right to be angry, but if you want to get something done, you may need to get rid of that anger and have that conversation to talk about how to get acclimated. So I think that's also something why it's important for there to be Black faculty and staff to have those conversations with our students, because when they come into a space or whatever, they do see color. Maybe not everybody does, but I think we do, and we own that.
And let me just say also that we end up being mentors for all students. It's beneficial for us to be here because we certainly have that understanding of how it's difficult to make it in various environments. Well, some of our students are first generation college students, and they're not all people of color. And so these students struggle just like every other student struggles. And so it's important to realize we are not just role models for students of color. We are role models for every student.
It's interesting you said that, because the athletic department also uses me when they recruit. And it was probably about, 14, 15 years ago, where I had to have conversations with them and say just what Dr. Fluke says. I'm open to helping to recruit but I don't want you bringing only the African-American students to me. It's an environment where everyone has to go to school, and sometimes we have to be intentional in saying that. Now, we have to also respect the fact that some of our African-American students are not having the type of experiences we want them to have, but she's absolutely right. When we have students, we got 38,000 students, and we're going to make ourselves available to all of them.
Is there anything else anyone would like to add? Okay, we can keep going. So the African American Studies minor is relatively new in the grand scheme of Texas State's history. So my question is, how does educating students on Black history help in enacting change? And I'll allow the faculty to answer first.
If we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat the issues that, the problems that we've had. We've got to know history. History is critical to me. I majored in English and history at the HBCU that I attended. And I am really big on making sure that not only my students of color understand how history has been written and how persons of color have been left out of that history that has been written. And so it is critical for us to have this dialogue, for us to understand the significance of our role, because we've had significant roles in history, going all the way back to slavery, going all the way back to the inventions that my students don't know that, but I'm certain to make sure that before they leave my class, they understand that yes, there's a Thomas Edison, but there are also others who came up with some of the things that we take as commonplace right now. So I think that the minor that we've come up with, and I was on that committee, I'm really pleased to say that one of the things I'll be working on is African Americans in media for that minor. But I think it's critical for not just students of color, again, not just African American students, but for all students to know the history that is, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, what has been left out. And so much of our history has been left out.
So we may sound like a broken record here, but I'm going to agree with Dr. Fluke in what she said. And I think so I was interviewed last week by a young lady that Jaden may not forget her name. I'm not even sure she gave me her name, but she told me she worked with the University Star, but she was also doing a project for a class, and she wanted to talk to me about the Black Lives Movement. So we had a conversation. And then she asked me a question about what did I consider to be the most significant element of the Black Lives movement. And I thought for a second, and I told her, I said, well, I think there were two things. I said, one, I think that when we saw and for me, I used the George Floyd incident. When we saw the George Floyd incident, but we saw people started to march and whatever, I said, I think the pandemic was significant because people weren't working, they were home. And Netflix, if you bought Netflix stock, you made some money. But the context of that is that people were glued around the television more. And so when we saw the activism, for me, what was significant is seeing the number of non-Blacks involved in the movement. Because see, we've been talking about this for years, decades, 400 years. And it's labeled with sometimes, well, pull yourself up by the bootstrings. Our boots don't have straps, a lot of us. Sometimes it was like, that's just a sob story. But when we started seeing white people engage and have the conversation, it was almost for me, is that I was able to exhale a little bit and say, I don't have to be out front. So when we start talking about the Black studies, it's important that those individuals who are not Black engage in that and that they're educated, because a lot of this we bring to campus with us. We have the knowledge with what's happened with Black history. We may not be as fully knowledgeable. I'm not as knowledgeable as Dr. Fluker, but she also taught, she teaches. My undergrad degree was accounting, but I had the benefit of being raised as an only child with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother was born in 1899. She died in 1999. That's who I came to every day. And so some of that I got, but I think it's important to have the African American studies, but I'm in agreement with Dr. Fluker. I think it helps those individuals who are not familiar with African American culture and history to understand and know as well, so that when they do hear us in this discourse and whatever, they have some type of a basic foundation of understanding, and then we can all live and grow from there.
Kim, you know, I've got one more thing I need to say. I need to add something to that. He's absolutely right. George Floyd in our time right now, and the video taken by the young lady just standing there who changed the world, by the way, the largest protest movement ever in the history of the world. But I can give you some examples that helped us get to George Floyd. If you go all the way back to the 1950s and you see Emmett Till, the young man from Chicago who was murdered, and I mean, brutally murdered. And his mother opted to show the picture of her son in the casket. And she said, "I want the world to see what they did to my baby." That was the George Floyd of the 1950s. I did my dissertation, my PhD paper on the role of television in the civil rights movement. And let me just suggest to you that Emmett Till led to Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks, of course, is going to yield Martin Luther King Jr. And then we've got John Lewis and so on and so forth. But that is the movement that began very similar to what George Floyd. We had news cameras giving us the pictures back then. Now we have bystanders. We have, everybody has an iPhone or a Samsung phone. And so now everyone is a citizen journalist. And journalists are the first drafts of history. They're the ones who write the first draft of history. And so now everyone is doing that. But it started back all the way back in the 1950s when we had, again, Emmett Till. That's history we need to know. And again, what Dr. Morton said, there were whites, there were Jews, there were any number of groups who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King to try to ensure that we had rights that we did not have before. And so what we see is a new movement that is galvanizing around something very similar to what we had in our past.
You know, interestingly, and I don't want to take away from the students' time as you were talking about and you were giving that lineage, the young lady who interviewed me and we were talking about George Floyd, I said, well, that wasn't the first. I said, you know, we got cell phones and whatever. And I asked her, you know, about Rodney King. She had never heard of Rodney King. I said, well, you may want to go back and Google Rodney King. And I think this is what we're talking about learning and understanding history, because for those individuals who never saw, you know, what you saw, George Floyd, now unfortunately he died, but if you see the beating of Rodney King and that no one was found responsible, then that becomes a part of that history where you start to understand some of the frustration, the outrage, and you're sitting there looking at it. But yeah, she had never heard of Rodney King.
Evan or Cree, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I definitely think today people are desensitized from Black pain because we've always kind of been portrayed as side characters in like white people's stories. In entertainment, in culture, we're always like, our stories have always been watered down or minimized to just the civil rights movement or just slavery, when they're so much more complex than that. And so people in all areas of study, from criminal justice to biology to psychology, they need to realize that Black people influenced every single one of those fields in one way or the other. And we helped build this country just as much as the next person did. And so I think that's important, because that's why today people find it so easy to disregard us, is because we are seen as if we didn't contribute to this. If anything, we're seen as if we make it worse. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, Black people, you know, in our history, our influence is very, you know, rich in the world, right? you know, our culture, our ancestry goes back hundreds of thousands of years, right? And for me, as an African American studies minor, like I started last spring and I finished last fall. It really expanded my knowledge and perspective on the African diaspora, African and Black people in America and abroad. And I also think it's important that, you know, non-Black people also are able to truly learn this, you know, important and vast history and perspective from, you know, Black professors. So, you know, it's been an honor to, you know, learn from Dr. Goldstone. And, you know, I've been lucky. I had other Black professors, like 2 or 3, but like at, you know, Texas State. So I would just say like Black history and, you know, our impact on the world and, you know, in America or wherever is something that should be learned. And, you know, it didn't start with the civil rights movement. It didn't start with slavery. You know, it started well before that. And it's, you know, it continues and it's going to continue.
Is there anything anyone would like to add before we move forward? Okay. We have a little over 10 minutes left for this portion of the event. So I'm going to ask a question that relates to a lot of events that have been occurring recently and the impact that they may have on the future. And I want to get everyone's perspective on it. So in light of Texas State's NAACP petition calling for the defunding of police, I wanted to ask, why do students believe that defunding UPD is the best course of action when it comes to implementing change in the University Police Department? And what other changes do you think UPD can do to make Black students on campus feel safer? I'll allow the students to answer first, and then the faculty, and then we'll close out this event.
Yeah, so our petition, right? It's not the home run of change, but it's one of many changes that can happen that can better our campus. So, you know, me and Cree, our unit, you know, we believe that UPD is overfunded, unnecessary, and they neither prevent or solve crime, right? So here we are in a health and economic, you know, crisis, right? And they have a fiscal year operating budget of $4 million. They also have a new $9 million UPD building that's being built for them, right? I just think that's a gross injustice, you know, to the students in the greater Texas State community. That money can be going towards, you know, things that, you know, directly serve students. And so like with our petition, right, we want to basically defund UPD and dismantle, you know, their functions and operations until like they're basically abolished from our university. So their money can go towards more, you know, the hiring and retaining of Black faculty and staff, such as like Black counselors, Black social workers, more Black faculty, you know, to teach in all areas, you know, across the university, but specifically like the African American Studies minor, because there's a lack of Black professors to teach the courses, right? You know, more money can go to IIE that, you know, directly serves Black and brown students in the greater Texas State community. You know, the expansion of our health, our mental health initiatives, our educational initiatives, you know, our veterans and stuff like that. So we plain and simple just think that UPD is unnecessary. They're overfunded. They don't prevent and solve crime. And you know, we have a San Marcos Police Department. We have a Hayes County Sheriff Department, right? That could, you know, easily respond to anything on campus, right? If anything was to happen. And, you know, just within the last few years, going back to the fall of 2018 and the spring of 2019, we've seen students who were, you know, peacefully protesting, you know, getting one Hispanic student was tackled to the ground for taking off a hat. Like another student was, put in a chokehold for talking how I'm talking to y'all. Like other students were arrested, for demanding accountability from student government. Like the UPD completely escalated those situations, right? So that's not safety, that's not security. And quite frankly, Texas State is not like a violent campus. Like UPD has created that environment, also like with the Black student organizations. Like anytime we would have events, like we always felt we were being over policed, because like we would see UPD at our events, but they're not at, the white student organizations events and stuff like that, So yeah, we just quite frankly don't see a need for UPD, and we feel like their money and resources can go to better things that directly protect, serve, and uplift Black and brown students in the greater Texas State community.
Coming from a criminal justice perspective and the perspective of like the movement we've been seeing, for me, this Black Lives Matter movement has been very eye-opening, and I never realized how a lot of the Black men being killed are college and like high school age. Even the girls, we just saw that with Nakia Bryant, and over the summer we saw multiple Black men from the ages of like 17 to 28 get killed. And so I feel like I would like the students to feel more comfortable on their own campus, and we don't need, UPD is essentially an extension of the police. I don't see university police any different or any softer than I see the normal police we see around our county. And so having an additional extension of that, I think, makes the minority students, the Black students especially, feel very uncomfortable. And that goes to what we were talking about earlier in terms of recruiting Black students. I think they're already uncomfortable on a predominantly white campus, or at least that's what it feels like. And so to have this, having our events being over-policed, having only us being targeted when it comes to these movements on campus, it's kind of just increasing the tension we already have in our day-to-day lives outside of the university when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we have to see it in our own schools, which is also kind of painful. And I agree, I do think they are overfunded, especially with offices like IIE that could do so much and deserve so much more in that sense. And we need more Black healthcare workers. We need just Black staff in general. If we want to keep these Black students here, we need to let them know that there are faces that look like them that are going to be advocating for them, even though there are some that don't look like them that'll have their back. It's different to have that common experience and have that comfortability. So yeah.
I guess I would say I've heard the term defunded. I've heard it as a concept. I've heard people that originated with the Black Lives Movement talk about it as a concept, but the reality of actually defunding a police department, I don't think it makes us any safer. So as part of what I've done when I came to the Dean of Students office, I oversaw student conduct for 5 years. And actually Dr. Ben, who you all are familiar with, was the person who decided that she would hire me. So she was my supervisor. And we would have discussions because sometimes there are perceptions out there. And I can share with you in those 5 years that the overwhelming majority of the individuals that I saw in terms of police reports and whatever, they were not Black students. I had I'm not gonna say very few, but I would say less than 4 to 5% of my cases were Black students. But I can tell you some of the cases that were reported to me, I'm glad we had police around. They just weren't highly publicized. So in terms of immediate reaction to things that may happen in a residential hall, I don't want to be dependent on Hays County Sheriff's Department or SMPD responding, because and I've had about 4 different times when I've spoke with SMPD where they've generated these conversations. We've had them on Sundays, and I've been with panels with well, I don't want to say other pastors, but it's in pastors because I'm not a pastor. and a couple of our students were engaged, and they talk about, when we start talking about mental health and things that take officers away, and sometimes writing a ticket may consume 4 to 5 hours of an officer's time, and because they're taken away. Well, if we're depending on SMPD in Hayes County and we have something happening on campus, we may not have the immediate response that we need. So we need to have, in my eyes, a university police department. Now, with that being said, I think training is key. I think the discussions that we have around this population that you now work in, which is a university campus, is that we need to look at who it is that we're serving. You know, so I'm one of those individuals that I was born and raised in the hood in Fort Worth. It's 99% Black. And my father lived in Houston, and we lived in South Park. For those of you who know that, that's Black. Some of us are leaving that area to get away from that setting. And so when we come in here, you all are part of the talented tent. Some of that attention and perception that we have, it doesn't need to be given to you because you're trying to leave some of those areas, go back and make those better. So I think there's an understanding and a conversation that we need to have, and a lot of that is going to be based on the training. The other deal is, in my experiences, and I've shared this with UPD, is that there have been many times I've sat on committees, and one question that stands out to me a lot is when we ask the question about what is the purpose and role of law enforcement. So many times I get is to protect and serve, and I was okay, expand on that. And the response has been more about the protecting and serving of property rather than people. And I was like, well, what about the people? Can someone speak to the students? Now, this is regardless of color. And the response that I would get a lot of times is, oh, that's a given. I was like, well, it's not a given if you don't say it. So I say that to say that I think there is some intentional training and discussions that we need to have about the type of officers we bring here, but also in recognition of who it is that you're serving with these 38,000 students and the talented tent. I don't need and now it's not easy being a police officer as well. So if you're coming to me in South Fort Worth, you may have a different mentality and a fear about you than if you're coming over to, I was gonna say Bear Hall, I think they've torn down Bear Hall, but in the type of halls that you're looking at and the people that you're gonna engage in. So I think training and hiring is key, but I think we benefit from having law enforcement on campus.
And I know we're winding down now, but I would just say I absolutely agree with Dr. Morton. I'm a mother of 3, but 2 of those are boys and young men, and both graduates, double graduates of Texas State, go Bobcats. But what I would say is that, so I understand where the students are coming from. I understand that in your minds, when you think of police, in this instance, UPD, you think more along the militaristic side of what they do. And I, as a mother, I would also want to make sure that UPD is there when my children or my students, who are also my children, need them most. And so I would agree with Dr. Morton that there is a need, and perhaps Texas State is as safe as it is. In spite of those instances that you've lifted up, they are as safe as they are because we have a UPD. There is no question in my mind that UPD, like every other police entity, will need the training, will need sensitivity training. They need to understand the populations that they serve. And perhaps that's the problem that we face with not just our UPD, but across the nation. It's not just good enough to put the uniform on and to understand that you've got a gun and you've got this. You've got to understand, just like we said in the very beginning, you've got to recruit students of color in a very different way. You also have to police them in a different way. And so you've all had the lessons that your parents have had to teach you, that when you get stopped, you want to put your hands on the wheel, turn the car off, put your keys on the dash. That's unfortunate that we have to have those kinds of discussions. But even with all of that and with all of the unrest that we have, I also know that the police force has been there for me when I've needed them, either at UPD or Austin Police Department or Houston, where I'm from. So here's what I say. I think we need to have this discussion, figure out how we can make them better for our mental health, for what it is that we need them to do for us. But I do feel like we're going to need them in the end.
Is there anything else anyone would like to add before we close?
I would just say, I think we can't let ourselves pander to fear or the worst case scenario. And we also got to understand that more money or more training, that means more money going in, to UPD's pockets, which again is taking money from other essential areas of UPD, right? And when we talk about what UPD responds to, are we talking about a freshman, smoking marijuana in their dorm? Are we talking about a traffic infraction are we talking about theft that's not prevented or solved in the aftermath? So it's
talking about assaults. I'm talking about rapes. I'm talking about physical assaults. I'm talking about bodily harm. I'm talking about suicide attempts. I'm talking about real crimes. So some of those other things I may get as student conduct that don't come from the police department. It may come from a faculty member or someone in an RA or something. But I'm talking about when I'm looking at police reports, it's the same types of crimes that we know that happens in inner cities, Houston or whatever. Again, it's not anything that's publicized. We don't hide it. We put crime statistics on our websites, but no, we're talking about real crimes. You got 38,000 people here that come from all different walks of life. Sometimes just because we leave the hood doesn't mean we don't bring it with us.
Right. And let me just say this. I think Dr. Morton would agree. When we say training, we're not talking about giving them more money to train.
Oh, no.
We're saying that the training that they have perhaps is not as adequate as it needs to be. So we're not suggesting that we overfund them, because I think when police organizations are overfunded, that's when they become more militaristic. So we're not saying pour more money into it. We're saying that they need to revamp what they're doing right now. And Dr. Morton is absolutely right. When you sit in an office with a student who says, I was raped last night, then that student is not thinking, defund. They're not thinking that. They're thinking, I need help. And as a faculty member, I have to report it. And I have to say, we've got to get UPD involved. And so it just happens too often where I see the need on a daily basis.
I was just going to say that as a matter of training, I also think there needs to be some type of, with all police forces, if they're going to continue, some type of guided discretion. I think that would help a lot, because I think no matter how we train, there will be people with implicit biases that they're unaware of. So I think, kind of like San Marcos just passed recently, there needs to be some type of guide on how to treat a standard for everyone, so that they don't let their own personal feelings get involved in how they treat person to person. Like, there's just a standard of how they need to treat everyone, and how they need to ticket everyone, and how they need to approach everyone. And also with saying that, kind of like what Dr. Morin was talking about, when police officers do deal with really rough areas, I think it is important too that because of that, they do not stereotype everyone in that area. Because I do think that does happen, where they do see crazy, horrible stuff, but because they saw that, they kind of cover everyone in that area to be that kind of person, when that isn't true. Sometimes the area is just a rough area, but there's a lot of gems and good people in those areas as well. So when we're talking about recruiting and training, I do think there's some things that can't be fixed in regards to people's personal feelings towards others of another race, but there's a way we can, I guess you could say, mandate it or create regulations so that they aren't even allowed to get their personal emotions involved. So yeah.
The exciting part, Cree, is that we have people like you coming into the criminal justice system. And
Thanks.
that will ensure change as well.
Thank you.
We are unfortunately out of time, and out of respect to the other sections of the event, I think we're going to end now. But before we go, I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Morton, Dr. Fluker, Evan, and Cree for taking part in this discussion. I think it was really progressive, and I hope that the future we're able to see change.
Thank you.
Outstanding job, sir.
Thank you.
Well, thank all of y'all for attending this first part of the event. Our speakers here, obviously Kim Davis Jr., who's our podcast editor at the Star, has done a remarkable job this year, also moderating this event. Dr. Lloyd Fluker, the all-time great in my eyes when I see it, when it comes to my lineup of professors. Dr. Morton, who they call Lemon, I learned a few weeks ago. So Dr. Morton, we appreciate it. And Evan and Cree, very insightful discussion that I think we all can sort of use to push forward. So thank y'all so much. So y'all, we're not done yet. We still got the rest of this event left. So here's how it's sort of gonna go. So right now, actually, I'm gonna drop 2 links within this chat. I'm gonna drop 2 links. The first link is gonna be a link to the University Stars website, where we house the University Stars 11% project. And I think with this, some of you who may have not read or seen the things we've done, the audio stories, the timelines, all these different things, this is where you can find this. I'm gonna send this in the link too. And then also, we have official 11% project merchandise that we've created. So again, this project has become a part of us, and this was sort of a way that we wanted to push this thing forward and continue to spread the word. So obviously, all proceeds support, the University Star, student journalism, which we find it obviously is a public service. But again, thank you to our speakers for the first session, Kim Davis Jr., Dr. Lloyd Fluker, Dr. Vincent Morton, Evan Bookman, and Cree Taylor. And so we're gonna take a little 6-minute video break. So we'll play 2 back-to-back videos, starting with a wonderful, wonderful poet from the Black Texas State community. So I'll let them introduce themselves, which they'll do in the video. And then also a staff video, or excuse me, not staff video, a student video from, again, more of Black Texas State. So a lot more to unpack. I will say, the editor of me has to say, is that over the last 2 days, we've had a technical difficulty with this one video. So you will see a minor typo on the screen. And I know all of my AP people watching, I promise we tried to fix it, but we figured that the answers were too important to leave out. So you will see that, but we have 2 videos planned. And when we come back, we'll have you've heard a lot of mentions already of the wonderful Dr. Goldstone, who heads the African American Studies Department, who will lead a discussion with STAR staff as we reflect on the 11% project and close this event out. So stick around, do not leave, get you some water, and then we're gonna continue this dialogue and push it forward. We're gonna go ahead into the poem, and then the student video. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brianna Miller, and I'm so grateful to be able to perform for the 11% project here at Texas State, especially because the project's topic is so relevant to current events. The name of my piece is Construction. I hope you enjoy. The last time we knew freedom, we were in our mother's womb. Our entire existence dark and watery. There was nothing to tell us she was not the universe, that we were not infinite beings, but infinity was cut short with the umbilical cord. We were born into makeshift buildings, surrounded by brick walls, glass ceilings, and no doors. That is to say, we are born into a society that constantly makes us aware of the barriers that oppress us. We grew up in a world of obstacles that we did not create, and we're told it is our responsibility to scroll through them, so that we can rise from the rubble with the title of first Black anything. Because we are supposed to be proud, not disgusted that in 2021, institutions are just now seeing the value of people that look like us. And isn't that the generational curse of being Black? Artists working in the field, yet the last to receive credit. We live in a world that has watched people break out of the buildings they were born into, yet when someone gets hurt from the debris, we are blamed for the destruction. That is to say, we live in a society that would rather criticize how our liberation harms them than to do anything to liberate others. We live in a world where remnants of our buildings are taken and marketed as lofts, with exposed brick walls and stained glass ceilings, except they get a door and wide open windows that let in all the light. And here we are, bloody knuckled and still expected to smile, because the struggle has no place in academia. Yet they ask us to sit on panels, to host open forums, to perform a piece about overcoming adversity, all to explain why we are deserving of anything we have, including our breath. We are hired because the color of our skin makes the company look less racist. But we are not allowed to call out our coworkers on the microaggressions. Or we will be labeled sensitive or difficult to work with, told that we are making others uncomfortable. That is to say, we live in a society that wants to take centuries-old oppression and conflate it with discomfort. They who see skylines of buildings and decide their activism is to spray paint, you can do it on a couple of brick walls. They who go home and eat with their families whose wealth comes from centuries of construction work. They who will hear this poem and once again wonder why all my poems have to be about race. That is to say, nothing we don't already know. So I write myself out of buildings and onto stages like these, all to say that pretty words will not reverse what has already occurred in this country. There will be no progression without action and major sacrifice. That is to say, are you ready for that? Thank you.
My experience as a Black student here at Texas State, I wouldn't say it's challenging, but it's scary to say. It's also been really, really fun. I really like the diversity of the college, but I do feel as if there's a lot that could be done in terms of, I don't know, acknowledging and hearing the Black students at Texas State. But besides that, I've really enjoyed the fact that I could even meet a bunch of Black people here and have that community of students and like the BSU. I've never been to a school this diverse, so it was different, but in a good way.
Being a Black student at Texas State is really amazing. It's really eye-opening to see that it doesn't feel like there's only 11%, and it's like really just a really open community. And I love the opportunities that we get in other places around campus. And I just really love it. So yeah.
And just like you said, I've had a wonderful experience here while being a Black student. There are multiple opportunities that I've seen, and also there are multiple organizations that are also celebrating Black excellence and just letting Black students shine on campus.
So in the theater community, I'll talk about because I'm an acting major. In the theater community, I will see another Black student and I'll be like, oh my God, are you new here? And they'll be like, no, I've been here for 4 years, or like 3 years. And I'm like, I legitimately have never seen you ever, because we just don't get to connect a lot in that area. And it just really made me wonder why. And then all of the opportunities that I'm given in plays and stuff like that, for example, always have to do with Black talk. And I think, just metaphorically speaking, there's a lot more that we can do in the views of Black students and not making them advocates for the trauma that they experience every day and have us just be students for once.
Honestly, like I didn't know there was only 11% because majority of the people that I hang out with are Black students. That's what I see.
in one word, I would describe my experience at Texas State as different.
I would just say welcoming. I feel like that's just like as a first year like freshman, I just really love being here, and it's really just open and welcoming to like, the community, and also just like young Black men like we are. I just really love it.
I would say just grateful, because I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had being here, and I'm also grateful to be able to see the changes that are being made on campus to make sure every student feels included, especially with Black students, and the events that are going on in the world.
I'd say challenge. Just because you fit in, but not really. Like you have to be cautious of what you're doing, how you do it in front of people.
With that, we'll lead into our second roundtable led by Dr. Goldstone, head of the African American Studies program, all along with University Star staff, including myself. I'll be on it. So we'll go ahead and get started, but as they all load on.
Hello, everyone.
Greetings, Dr. Goldstone. How you doing?
I am fine.
Good to see you. Yeah, well, it's all yours. It's the first time we're on the receiving end, I guess, of the questions and whatnot. So it's your show, and here we go. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm at my house, so hopefully my dogs will not act up. So if you hear barking, that's the reason for the barking. Anyway, well, thank you everyone for coming as well. So I'm gonna first let you all introduce yourselves. And Jaden knows this because he's been a student in my class, but I always take attendance with a question of the day. So when you introduce yourselves, tell me, I guess they see your name on the screen, but anyway, tell me your name anyway. Tell me your major, your year, where you're from, and then I would like to know what your favorite candy is. And if you've been following me on Twitter, you know that mine is Reese's peanut butter cups, and I'm still waiting for someone to drop them off at my office. But Jade, you can go first, and then we'll just go around.
Absolutely. So I'm Jaden Edison. I'm the editor of the Star. I'm a senior electronic media major, so I graduate May 14th. My last day here at the Star is on Saturday. It's all unfolding. I'm originally from Chicago, which I always get made fun of because Dr. Goldstone's like, no, you're from Houston, but you're not even from Houston because you're in the Woodlands. So it's a lot of stuff going on there. But I would say I was created and I learned a lot of Chicago, and Houston helped, mold me a little bit, into who I am. And then favorite candy, I'm not a big candy person, but I do love Reese's as well. And I can do Snickers too. I can do Snickers, but I would choose Reese's over anything else.
All right, thank you. Christella, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, well, my name's Christella. I'm a senior at Texas State. My major is electronic media and my minor is Spanish. I'm from San Antonio, and my favorite candy, I guess it would just be the, Hershey's, just like a regular Hershey's bar. They never disappoint, so.
Can you also tell us what you did at the Star as well?
Oh, yeah, of course. So I'm the Life and Arts editor of the University Star. Yes, ma'am.
Hannah?
Hello, I'm Hannah Thompson. I'm the multimedia editor at the University Star. I'm a senior. I graduate in the fall. I'm a history major and a mass comm minor. I'm from San Antonio, and my favorite candy bar is those chocolate Cadbury bars. So yeah.
Kim?
Hello, my name is Kim Davis Jr. I am a junior at Texas State. I'm an electronic media major. I am originally from New York, moved to right outside of Austin about 10 years ago. And I've been thinking about my favorite candy ever since you asked. I don't know. I'll say Skittles.
Gabriella?
I think that's non-video. Erica's the last one.
All right, Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Thompson. I'm the engagement editor at the Star. I'm a senior public relations major. I graduate in December. And I think my favorite candy is the white chocolate peanut M&Ms.
So I'm going to ask kind of another general question. What made all of you decide to come to Texas State? I'll go back the other way. So I'll start with Erica.
My decision to come to Texas State is actually really weird. I feel like it's just weird. I basically had decided that I was gonna go to SFA. And like I had, told my parents and everything. And I had never even thought about Texas State. Like I honestly had forgot that it existed. But I had like a promotional tweet on Twitter one day when I was scrolling through my feed, and I was like, oh. So I went ahead and like looked at the Mass Comm program, and I decided to just apply. And I visited to tour the campus. And I noticed that this one time that I visited, like there was nothing like that. It was just a perfect day. And that's so significant because every other tour that I had done for college, and I had done like so many, there was something that had went wrong, whether it was like the weather was bad, it was cold outside, I had an attitude, my parents were getting on my nerves, like something made me just be like, can we just go home? And when I toured Texas State, like it was just a perfect day, nothing went wrong. And I was like, is this God telling me to come? I don't know, it sounds weird, I know. But yeah, that was how I decided.
Is it me?
Hannah, I forgot I put myself on mute. Hannah.
Honestly, same as Erica. Texas State wasn't like the first on my list. My goal in general was to go to like a university that had like a school of communications, but not just like have just the major as communication. So like having journalism and having like electronic media. So when I first like applied, I wanted to be in journalism. So that was really the main reason why I chose Texas State. And I went to the campus and I thought it was really beautiful. So that's going to be my decision.
Kim?
I had been really familiar with Texas State. I had gone to a band camp with the music program for 4 years. So I had become really acclimated with the faculty there. But my first choice school was actually University of North Texas. But I called them about my major, which at the time was information systems. And they transferred me to 4 different departments, and I ended the phone call with no answers. So this was my second choice school, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do a career in programming and coding, and I read about the electronic media program, and that's kind of how I made that pivot, and I haven't looked back since.
Christella.
Yeah, so I guess like everyone else, Texas State wasn't my first choice, which is, crazy now because like now I'm a senior and I can't even imagine like life without Texas State at this point. But yeah, so I had originally wanted to go to Baylor. I had gotten into Baylor my senior year, but once we saw the price tag at the end, we were like, oh, it's not going to work out. So Texas State was actually my second choice. And so I ended up coming to Texas State, and I ended up coming with like a group of my friends. Since I was like the only one from my high school that was going to go to Baylor, I was kind of like hesitant to go to Texas State with like people I knew. But like once I was there, I was like, this is like the best decision I could have made. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got here.
Thank you. Jaden.
Yeah, it was more of like a leap of faith. I mean, so I guess Texas State kind of came at a weird time because I had been getting pamphlets in the mail from Abilene Christian University. They offered me like a $24,000 scholarship, and then I Googled and I realized they had a midnight curfew during the week. I said, that's not gonna work because I stay up late every night. So I was like, that's just not gonna work. And then, so I didn't end up going there. And then I was looking at A&M, and I applied to A&M. I'm in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't end up there. I don't think it would have been a fit at all. But at the time, it seemed like something that was interesting. And then they accepted me, but they said, hey, you have to go to one of our feeder schools for a year, and then you can get in. So me, I was looking for sort of a 4-year journey. Like I didn't want to go somewhere and leave. I wanted somewhere where I can sort of get here or get there and then be able to, build on the foundation. And I found out in Texas State. So I actually had never visited Texas State until NSO, New Student Orientation. I got here, I was like, okay, I can do this. You know, I had already enrolled, put the money down, but I was like, well, I have no choice. And my mom and them didn't like it because it was too many hills, and they were complaining about all the hills during NSO. But yeah, I mean, but looking back, I think it was, you know, with all the flaws, you know, that Texas State has, you know, I tell everybody, you know, I wouldn't trade it in because I think I've learned so much and met so many remarkable people, and yeah, and gleaned some opportunities that I don't think I would have gotten elsewhere. So that's my journey.
That actually leads me nicely into my next question. Would you recommend Texas State to other Black students?
You know, that's a hard one, right? Because I think we've talked about this in class, right? The important, like, HBCUs and whatnot. And every student's a little bit different, right? I think for me, you know, there are a lot of different factors and whatnot. I think too, like the exposure, especially growing up in the area. I went to high school in the Woodlands area, which is predominantly white. Like they're not talking about HBCUs, right? It's like the schools you're looking at are going to be what, UT, A&M, you know, then you get into Texas State, U of H, all those, Baylor, all those schools like we mentioned here. But the HBCU, only thing I ever heard of HBCUs from my mom who went to Alabama State University, right? So, you know, for me, that wasn't something that I sort of grew up. I didn't grow up with the intention to go to a HBCU because it was never really discussed outside of my mom who went there. So I know every school's a little bit different, and students, you know, look for things that fit them. You know, coming to a PWI, I think you do sign up for an environment where you know the environment is probably not going to be as inclusive as you want it to be, right? Like you're going to have to go over additional obstacles and hurdles that, you know, your white counterparts aren't going to have to do. And students, you know, you decide if that's something that you want to deal with, right? You know, for me, I found journalism, so that's been my thing that sort of kept me on the right path to be able to, you know, it's okay. Like we see these things going on at the university, right? Where we have our purpose is to step in and let people know that this is a thing that's happening, right? And here's what the people in power are doing or not doing, you know, to address it. And I think that's been the thing that sort of kept me on the path and stay focused and not get too high or low. It's the journalism and realizing the importance and how important that is. Like we need Black journalists, we need, you know, Black media professionals, we need Black people in these spaces to sort of push things forward, right? The conversation in the last panel that Kim moderated, right? Like that doesn't happen when you have, all white, you know, group in a classroom. It's very whitewashed, and I don't think the conversations are as authentic. So I think it depends on the student. But for me, I think, you know, I wouldn't trade it in. I think I've learned so much, even with all the flaws at the university.
Thank you. Christella, do you want to answer? Would you, and this, I'm going to ask everyone this, would you guys recommend Texas State to other Black students?
Yeah, I guess like going off of what Jaden said, like my father went to an HBCU and he kind of pushed me. He wanted me to go to an HBCU, but I grew up in San Antonio, so predominantly Hispanic school district, and kind of like Jaden, like we didn't really like hear about HBCUs very much. I only heard about it from my dad. So for me, when I was coming to Texas State, I thought it was going to be a larger Black population when I got here, but then when I, you know, joined the STAR and then like got into most of my classes, I was like, oh, it's just 11%, you know? So I thought that was really like interesting, especially since I was going to go to Baylor, which is like mostly white. So I just thought that was like really interesting. But for me, I think I would, you know, recommend Texas State because like all of the like professors that I've had have been like really, really excellent despite the color of their skin, and I have not had any like that have been like racist or like rude to me or that I've seen to any like of my like students. So I wouldn't like, I love the program, and I love like, you know, having to take journalism classes and my electronic media classes. I've learned so much, and I think like, but beyond that, I think that like obviously Texas State does need more you know, professors of color, and especially like in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, there's not enough. But overall, like I've had like an excellent education here, and I just know it'll just keep getting better like once time goes on. So yeah.
Hannah.
Overall, I would say yes. I'm kind of having the same thought process as Jaden and Christella when it comes to the environmental side of things. I was in the same boat as they were. The high school I went to, you know, they didn't really push historically Black universities and colleges. So taking just into consideration my experience in like the history department and my short time at the School of Journalism and Mass Comm, I think there were some really great professors and a lot of professors that you can like have as mentors and kind of like gain different perspectives on. So, and that to me, that's been invaluable. Like I've learned so much just through them. And I feel like I wouldn't be in the position I am now without them. So taking all that into consideration, I would definitely recommend the school to others.
Kim?
I would recommend Texas State as well. Like everyone has said thus far, it really depends on the student, you know, like if a Black student asks me, you know, hey, I'm like psychology, I'm journalism, I'm theater, like those departments, they're really strong. That's what I know from my experience. I would definitely say go. When I say it just really depends on the student, like for me personally, I came up around a lot of diversity, like a lot of my best friends, Black, Pakistani, white, Jewish, all that. So that was something that I liked about Texas State, how diverse it was. And I know there are some Black people who have just grown up around Black people, and that, you know, being in an environment like this kind of puts them out of their comfort zone. So I think that in that aspect, it's great. And also, if you're someone like me who comes from diversity, I think Texas State has really provided an opportunity to connect with my own Blackness and experience all different types of Black people. Part of my hesitancy to go to an HBCU was because that wasn't what I was accustomed to. And in seeing the really tight-knit communities and the Black activists and the prevalent, intelligent, intellectual Black people that Texas State offers, I think that that's really connected me in saying, oh, we really are very different. And I'm able to connect with, for example, all the Black people we have on staff. So I think that it definitely has a niche, but I think that Black students coming here are in great hands, and they can discover themselves and others in a really productive way.
Erica?
So like Christella, my dad went to an HBCU too, but because I didn't grow up around Black people like at all, my parents were actually like, no, like you can't go to an HBCU, like you're not gonna make it basically. And I didn't really know what that meant. And I mean, I feel like I can, like looking back, I feel like I would have been fine at an HBCU, but I'm glad that I chose Texas State. And I would recommend it to other Black students because I simply feel like the bonds that you make with other Black students in these environments are stronger and they're more tight knit because it's like we're all we have. And I don't mean that like there's a divide, like we're against white people and stuff like that. I mean like we're all Bobcats, you know, or like this is one community. But I feel like if I was at an HBCU, I don't think I would be as close. Like, for example, like Kim said, the STAR staff, people that I've met in my classes, you know what I mean? Because everybody's just kind of, you know, it's like it's an HBCU. But I don't know. I also feel like here I've loved my professors. I've loved the SJMC program, like just loved it. So I would recommend it to Black students and other students of color.
Thank you. So if you could tell white students one thing about being Black at Texas State, what would you want them to know? I guess I'll go back around the other way. So I'll start with Erica.
I would probably, that's a good question. What would I tell white students about being Black at Texas State? I'd probably just tell them that it's not the same, honestly. I'd probably just say like, I don't know. I think I would probably just leave it at that. Like, it's not the same. It's not what you think. I know that like in my experience, like with white peers and white classmates, sometimes they act like they don't know and sometimes they really just don't know. So I feel like just letting them know like it's not the same. I feel like the people who really just don't seem to see an issue, I don't know what I would say. I just feel like I would just be like, it's just not the same. It's not what you think. It's not like there is an issue. There are things that need to be changed.
Hannah.
I feel like for me, I'd want them to know the importance of listening to their Black peers and like taking what they're saying as being like valuable and like just, I guess, believing in what we're saying and not being like dismissive of it. Not that I've had like a ton of people do that to like me personally, But I feel like just being there to understand and being open to like understand our point of view and our experiences is just something that's super important.
Yeah, and I want to sort of comment a little bit on what you said, that I think you're right, that they need to listen and not listen to respond, but just listen and hear the stories. Kim?
Can you repeat the question one more time? Because I don't want to go off track.
Going off track is fine. Jaden does it all the time in class. If you could tell white students one thing, what it's like to be on campus, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to check their privilege. It's a really simple thing, and I think that it's important for all of us really, but especially when it comes to race. You know, like as a Black man, I'm always cognizant of my own privileges and the opportunities that I've had because I come from a middle class family. I'm able to pursue a higher education, and I'm able to have this job, fortunately, with other Black people. And I would say to a white student that you need to keep that in mind, because we tend to overgeneralize things so much. And, you know, there are plenty of black people who are doing really great. You know, they're not poor, they're not the stereotype. And on the other end, there are a lot of white people who are doing terrible. And, you know, they're not what you would think of when you think of like what a white person is in this country. So I think that that's a crucial and just a simple step that people, especially white people, can implement in their daily lives when thinking about others and how race relations are, especially as a Black student on campus.
Thank you. Christella?
Yeah, it's funny. I literally, when you said the question, I was like, no, you're privileged. Like that was like the first thing that came to my mind because, you know, like similar to Hannah, like I haven't had any like personal, like crazy, like racist relationships with anyone. Luckily, knock on wood, I don't want any of that to happen. But, you know, I have seen in like, even some of my classes, like there's been like discussions where we talk about things like in our last discussion, police abolition and things like that. So, and a lot of people are just like, well, like, okay, well, my grandfather is a cop, or, you know, all this stuff. So, but they're not seeing it from the perspective of a person of color who has to, you know, turn their car off, a person of color who has to keep their hands on the wheel. You know, they're not seeing it from there. They're just seeing it from, you know, how they've grown up and how, like, what they've witnessed. But rather, like, the people that I've seen, you know, or people I've grown up with, they just know already, like, okay, like when it comes to the police, we have to, like, you know, chill, you know? So I think for that, I would say definitely to know your privilege, and then obviously just like kind of how everyone's been saying, just like hear our story or hear our side as well. It's not just a one-sided conversation. And I think that that's super important, especially when it comes to, you know, journalism, getting like those diverse sources and not just sources that are like one-sided, whether it's just Black or just white. It needs to have both of those, because if not, then the full story can't be told. So yeah, definitely know your privilege and just hear our side for sure.
Jaden.
Yeah, I guess I'll put a journalism spin on it, just because that's been my entire experience here at Texas State is, you know, the white staff members that we have. And I think the biggest thing I would say is, and similar to everybody else's point, is the importance of listening, and the second, importance of education. You know, I found that there's so many times, right, and really that inspired, you know, this project, talking about the greatest game, this whole event, was because there was just a need, like, you know, you'd be talking to people, and some of the things they just say it's like you're living in two different Americas. I've heard that a lot, you know, when it comes to, you know, Black students and white students. It's two different Americas. Like, you can't possibly understand, like, just based on what you're telling me, I know you haven't done the research, you haven't done the reading, like, you don't see the bigger picture. And, you know, being able to listen to the people who have, right, the people on this call right here, you know, we're the people who've lived through those things, right? Like, we're the people who are telling you, we're telling you how, you know, people within the Black community are feeling. We're telling you how the actions that, you know, you're taking are making us feel. And, you know, oftentimes what happens in these predominantly white spaces is that, you know, people don't listen. And like you said, Dr. Ghost, some people listen to react. And I think that's, you know, that's something that, you know, I've always had difficulty with over my 4 years here at Texas State is, you know, when it comes to, you know, I'm trying to tell you, you know, you're telling me you want to understand, I'm telling you, and then you're not listening. that's the overall, that's back to the systemic problem that we started with. So, again, I think I don't want to repeat other points that people made, but I think the listening and the education is key, because it is not my job as a Black student, as a Black editor, whatever it is, to tell you, to essentially educate you on things that you're supposed to know, right? Like, you have to care so much, and I told you about the journalism spin, you have to care so much about what we're doing here that it ticks you off when you realize you don't know as much as you think you do. And that you're going out and you go do the research, right? And you pick up the book and you watch the documentary, and you want to have those open dialogue conversations like that. I think that's the key part, right? Is that too many people are not willing to do those things, right? And they think it's the job. Like, I shouldn't have to set aside in a meeting and say, hey, like, you really got to think about this, like, because if you really did the homework like you were supposed to do, if you really cared as much as you're supposed to, then those would be things that just naturally happen, right? Like, you understand the why part. And everybody here tell you I say the word why a lot when it's at the start. Like, people have to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I've seen that a lot here, though. But again, back to everybody's point, I think listening and education are pivotal. It's key.
So this was a question I actually hadn't planned on asking, but you brought it up with the listening and education. And we've talked about this a little bit in class, Jaden. What do you think about white students taking African-American studies classes? Because as you know, one of the conversations we've had in class is that it seems to be a space for Black students and a space for them to feel safe. But also the other argument is how can people learn if they won't take those classes? So I'm gonna ask everyone, but I'll start with Jaden since he's in my class this semester.
No, I mean, I 100%, like, I like to see that. I think, anytime, again, that goes back to what I was saying, right, is people taking the initiative to learn, right? Because I think, again, like, if you don't know the history, you know the saying, right, history repeats itself, right? And I think a lot of it, you see a lot of willful ignorance, right? You see a lot of misinformation being spread. So I think anytime, you can get, you have students, who take the initiative to do those things, I think it can only make us all better as a community, right? Like, I don't see it as a space where it's like, this should only be, our people here, like, this is our space. There's a lot of us, I know in the African-American studies class, like, in a way, it feels therapeutic to be in there just because, again, there's so many people that look like you, but at the same time, right, I think at the forefront of all these movements that we're seeing across the country, right, whether Black Lives Matter, so on and so forth, in any space, right, I think, the nucleus of those movements are, white people need to listen, right? Like, you can make the argument that we've seen the willful ignorance and things like all lives matter and whatnot. Hey, you're missing the entire point. We're telling you, look, white lives have always mattered, right? What we're telling you is that ours have not. So I think, again, the education is at the nucleus of a lot of those movements. And anytime you have, white students who take the initiative to do that, right, and with genuine intentions, right, like people who genuinely want to learn and grow, I think that can only benefit us all as a whole, especially at Texas State when we've had a really, I think when it comes to the administration and it comes to Black students, it's been a really, rocky relationship over the last several years, right? And a lot of students come here and don't know about that. But as any Black faculty, as Dr. Goldstone, I'm sure you would say, we talked about it in class, and any Black faculty member would tell you, like, these are things that, our Black professors and faculty members have faced as well growing up. So these aren't things that just started here at Texas State. I think that's the important part for white people to realize, is that these are things that have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And this is just Texas State's version of that.
Christella?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I definitely agree with Jaden that, white people, they should be, welcome into African-American studies courses, just because, like, who are we to dog on them for trying to, like, educate themselves? It would be different if they were in there to start a riot or start a fight, but I'd like to believe that most of them that are in there genuinely want to learn, like all of us do. So, I unfortunately haven't been able to take any African-American studies courses. I wish I really could have. I actually didn't find out about it until my senior year, so that was kind of sad. But when I found out about it, and like what you're saying with how, like, white people are taking those courses, I think it's super important. And I think, like, it reminds me of, like, when my dad would tell me that, he had, like, some friends that, like, a few white friends that went to, like, HBCUs, and they had this assumption that it was, like, going to be an easy school. And my dad told them, he said, it's not an easy school, it's a university, like everything else, So, and, like, for us going to a PWI, and, you know, us being the Black, like 11% population, you know, the fish out of water, I would say, I don't think that that's, you know, a bad thing. And I think that, like, we're all just here to learn. We're all just here to, like, educate ourselves, and we're all just here to get our education and better our futures. So I definitely would agree that having those types of conversations and having those types of people in African American Studies classes will just better the program, and just hopefully just get more people to hear our side of the story and not just, you know, listen to their side.
Hannah.
I agree with Jaden and Christella. I feel like everyone should be welcome into African American Studies programs and classes in general, because I feel like part of what we've been saying a lot is that people need to educate themselves and listen to our perspective. So I feel like enrolling in those classes can help in aiding that. And honestly, I feel like it's just a class that everyone should have to take in general, since not all history classes kind of like touch on the perspective of Black people or minorities in general. And since that is the case, you know, that makes it even more necessary to take that class. But yeah, also like Christella, for me personally, I didn't have the opportunity to take one, but honestly, I wish I had to be a part of that. But also, I wouldn't want to like dismiss, I guess, the fact that some people have that as their safe space as well. You know, I'm not gonna like knock on that, because I'm sure that is the case for some people. I've been in history classes where like I've been the only Black person with like my perspective, and hearing like other people's perspectives, like Jane said, it can kind of feel like we're in two different Americas. So I feel like having that class will help aid in them realizing that there's more than just their perspective.
Yeah, I think Jaden will say that we get into some interesting conversations that I'm not sure we could have. I'm not sure that you students have had in other classes, because it is this space of all Black kids talking about things like colorism, right? Like, maybe not sure is something that a lot of white students would understand, but they could sit and listen. Kim?
I think, especially after our last roundtable that we had, where we talked about the importance of educating students about Black history, it would be hypocritical to say, you know, we shouldn't let white students be in those spaces or those classes. And I don't see it as a negative thing. I understand the aspect of it's a safe space, and fortunately, it's not too late for me, so I'm still able to sign up for those classes and get that experience. But I think it's great. And I think that for me personally, I have like an interest in like Native American history and like Hawaiian history and like Polynesian history. And if I had an opportunity to take a class like that, I would love that, because it really fascinates me. And I can understand if a white student is like really in love with Black culture and they want to have a deeper understanding, they would want to jump on that opportunity as well.
Erica?
I pretty much agree with what everyone said. I definitely see both sides very clearly. The safe space aspect is like, I really feel that. I mean, I'm not in any classes, but it's not too late for me either, so I can still sign up too. But just like in my BSOs, like I'm in BSA, and not only are the conversations that we have in our general population meetings where we're talking about things like colorism, dating while Black, all types of things like that, and there's only Black people in the room, it just feels comfortable. You don't have to worry about what you say. You don't have to watch your mouth. You know, it's just like, it is a safe space. But at the same time, we welcome people who aren't Black to join as well. Does that happen very often? No, but the opportunity is there. At the same time, though, I personally feel like Black history should be required from like middle school. I feel like it's almost not fair that we're like, white history is shoved down our throats from like the moment we can read. And a lot of us we're in college, some of us are about to graduate and still don't know like even half of what Black history really is. You know what I mean? So I think white people should take African American studies courses, whether that's their minor or not. I think that it should be required. But like Christella said, I definitely feel, and Jaden too, I just feel like the intention should be pure. And I think it's honestly pretty easy to tell pretty early on, like if someone's coming into this space with, you know, cruel intentions. So yeah, I think that white people or white students should take the courses.
Thank you. To follow up what you said, Erica, I saw on Twitter, because you know I'm on Twitter a lot, that white privilege is your history taught as part of the curriculum and mine taught as an elective. I think it's a sad reality. So let's go to the 11% project. I want to hear which was your favorite story and why. And if you could tell a little bit about the story and then why it was your favorite story to either write or produce. I'll start with you, Erica, so I'll go back around the other way.
Like story or like, you know what I mean? Wait, am I confused?
However you want to answer it. So either a story that you wrote or that you did or that you, when I said produce, because I know some are like video stories, so.
Oh, like, okay. I think the one that, I think my favorite like aspect of the project for me was the creatives, because like I was saying in our like video, that I feel like Black people are all like, even just, I'm not explaining, but like Black people are just never really seen from like a, oh, like obviously we have talented people, Michael Jackson, Aretha Franklin, we know Black talent, but like.
I have to stop you, Michael Jackson's not Black. Just kidding.
Oh my gosh, my heart dropped. But you know what I mean? Just like, you know, we've seen Black artists, Black creatives growing up and, you know, in the news and media and stuff like that. But just seeing, like, being able to highlight the talents that our peers have, I feel like the 11% project as a whole was kind of focused on, as it should have been, you know, the things that were going on, like protesting, activism, the things that, you know, are more on a serious side of things. But just getting to see, like, you know, how people just like escape from those things and choose to put that anger or that frustration or whatever they're feeling into their passions and their talents was really like eye-opening for me. And it was really fun to like highlight that, in my opinion. However, I did interview 2 people for the activism part of our project about the May 1 incident on campus. And like, I had already heard the story because they were both on the Black Student Alliance e-board, and we know one of the Black men who was arrested. But hearing it again, like, I don't know, it just was like, wow, like this is really happening. And I don't know, it was just different for me because I don't think I've ever really like, no one I know has ever been arrested by the police or had an interaction like that, been killed or anything like that. So just like, I don't know, it was just like, wow. That's like the only way I can explain it. Like, but yeah.
Thank you. Hannah.
I also enjoyed interviewing for the activism story. I did the March on Clegg part. I interviewed people for that. And I wasn't in Texas State at that time. So like hearing people share their stories and like instead of just like reading old like archived like articles from the University Star, I feel like that really helped me understand like the whole situation. But I feel like my favorite out of all of them were the audio stories, specifically the election one. I worked on that with some of the former editors, so like Laura, and there was Lionel, and Bianca was also part of it. It was the first one. I didn't do any interviews for that one though. I edited the entire like not podcast, but audio story. And being able to like hear everyone's stories in full and helping like condense it down into like, I guess, just basically like pulling out the most important parts and able to like, I guess, amplify their message like even further and help showcase that like Black people aren't like a monolith. Like you can't just talk to one Black person and get like the entirety of like the Black community's perspective on one idea. So I think that's another thing I also appreciate about the audio stories, that they were split up into different categories. So you can see like the different perspectives when it came to the election that happened recently. And understanding, even if like a lot of people came to the same conclusion, their rationale as to why, or the experiences they had that led up to their opinion was kind of like different.
Thank you. Kim.
I'm very similar to Hannah in that the two that really stuck out to me was the activism story and the audio stories that we did, the story of the unheard. The reason that I really like the activism story, similar to what Hannah said, was being able to interview people and really get a deeper understanding. You know, it's one thing to read something, it's another thing to hear it from somebody and truly like capture the emotion in what they're saying and the gravity of the situation. So our group was fortunate enough. We interviewed with Mina Yasmin. She was a part of the student sit-in a couple years ago, and it was amazing. And then for all of us during that time at the beginning of this year, you know, coming off of winter break, we kind of needed a little bit of a reset. We were a little sluggish getting back to things, getting back to, you know, normal, especially having new hires at the beginning of the semester. We just had a break. And then for us to do that, and it took us a while, but then once we reached a point where we were like, okay, let's make this really long. And then let's put this in the newspaper. Let's have more people have exposure to this. So I felt like that was a really great time, especially like as a team unifying and getting to congregate and just tell these stories that people may not know about. And then the audio stories, similarly, that was around the time that I had got hired and I was really new here. I didn't know very many people. So in like breaking into those smaller groups and editing and being like, nah, this sounds good, and really working together as a team, I felt like it just strengthened our bond as a unit. And I think the quality overall for those was tremendous as well. So those are the ones that stuck out for me.
Thank you. Christella.
Yeah, sorry to beat the same bush, but I loved all of the stories we had. But the two that also stuck out to me were activism and language of the unheard. I worked on also creatives creatives. But my favorite was probably language of the unheard because like him, it was like, this was my second year at Texas State, but I didn't know too many people. So it was really cool to get to like talk to Jonathan Ash and Michael Smith and like get to like hear from them, like them being pulled over by the police, like in their own, in their own perspective. So it was really cool to like get to listen to them. And like how Kim was saying, like once you just hear it from someone, like it just sticks with you. So it was really cool to hear that. And obviously since it's an audio story, it's really, really impactful. And then activism was really great as well because I got to interview Tafari Robertson, who he organized the March on Clegg and all of that jazz that was going on back then. So it was really interesting to hear from him and kind of like look at Texas State in a different light, because obviously that was like many years ago and I think I was a freshman in high school at that time. So it was really cool to like, okay, this is what was happening in 2016, type of thing. So it was really interesting. And yeah, I really, really loved working on it. It's been amazing. And obviously the activism story was humongous. So it was really cool to just see all of us come together and put all of our stuff into this huge Google Doc and get to read all of it, because it was like, wow, like we did it. So yeah.
Thank you. Jaden.
So yeah, I'll branch off a little bit because I think we all are on the same page with like the language of the unheard audio series, which was in correlation with election month. And also activism. Those were super important. But I do want to go back to the very first thing we did, which was history. And that was so important to me. I remember my feelings through every single part of the project, and like the fatigue and like the things that were exciting, the hard parts, and all that stuff. But I remember with history, just going up to the archives, right? And that one really, I think that really helped me shape even further the way I view journalism, because I was going through the Stars archives from the 80s, right? And I'm like, if this stuff wasn't at the paper, like the paper wasn't on campus back then, we wouldn't know any of this stuff. So like half the project probably wouldn't even exist because there wasn't anybody to sort of document that. So I just remember that, and then working with Brianna to put the editorial piece together that we did. We sort of did like a perspective piece. We interviewed everybody on staff. We broke it up into decades, right? So obviously integration happened in '63. So we broke that up into decades, and I think we had like 2 or 3 people or something like that assigned to each decade. And we had 2 people write it, which was myself and the current news editor, who was the next editor-in-chief, Brianna. And the way that was broken up was that we interviewed everybody. And we got to hear just the different perspectives of what everybody learned in their respective decades, right? And then putting it all together, it was just really cool to see, like, especially to see all the Black people in like the 80s and 90s at Texas State, seeing what they were up to, what they were doing. Like there's a lot of similarities, right? Like a lot of them, involved in orgs and whatnot, obviously, fighting a lot of the same battles also. But it was really cool to see that. So that, and then activism was just so important to me because that's one of those stories I think that really pushes things forward, right? Like I got an email from a faculty member who said, yeah, I'm new here and I had no idea that any of this even happened. So thank you. I think that's the important part, right? Like getting in, a meeting with President Trump and say, hey, like, here's how Black students feel, right? And here's how they feel about the job that you and, the rest of the administration did in responding to it. And, to be able to hold sort of power to account and ask those important questions, that was really good for us. And to be able to put it in print, I think that's the thing that'll sort of resonate with me for years to come with this project.
Well, thank you. It's 6:56. Do I need to cut it off? I had one more question.
Yeah, I guess we can ask one more, then we'll close it out.
Okay, so I just have one question. And this is, I want you to think about what you would tell those in charge of Texas State, what they could do to make the campus more welcoming to Black students.
I'll start with this one, just because I think it parallels what I said earlier. Listen, like I can't stress enough, like I think the journalism is important, right? And here's the thing about the journalism is nobody has their ear close to the ground than we do. We're the people who are out there. We're talking to faculty, staff, students, a lot of us too who are Black ourselves, right? Being in positions of power where we can help dictate policy and procedure within this organization. We have a lot of the answers, right? And I think what happens is that too many times, Black students get in meetings with, administrators and they leave feeling like nothing was accomplished. And then you get in a space, I think, years later where it's like, okay, you're there in these administrative meetings, right now they had the initiative with Life Anew, the Restorative Justice Organization, and the thing is like, how do we, repair this relationship that's been broken? And the thing is like the things that Life Anew is likely telling the university are things that Black students have been saying for years and years and years, right? So it's like, why is it that they're being listened to and not the Black students, right? So I think there's that, right? I mean, so many times, like, I've interviewed, most people within the administration, and oftentimes, you leave those meetings frustrated, right? And granted, it's because on the journalism side, it's because you're not getting the answers you need, the answers you want, per se, or at least, the answers that students deserve to hear. And as a Black student, it's like, deep down inside, right? I don't believe in that false notion of objectivity, right? I look at journalism as the fairness of each piece of work, and that's how we should be judged. But in the back, as a Black student, I'm like, just don't get it. Like, I'm like, the questions I'm asking, this is what they want to know. And this,
All right, I'm cutting you off.
Go ahead.
All right, Christella, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I guess kind of going back to the whole like Black professor, thing we had earlier, I would definitely say that just having more Black professors on campus that teach not just in the African American Studies minor, but in all of the departments of Texas State. I know for me, I kind of mentioned this, but I think that there should be like definitely more Black professors in the School of Journalism, Mass Communication. I can't speak for all of the schools because I have not, been in all of the schools yet. But I definitely think that there should be more representation and more people that like look like their students being taught, and I also think that just having like those conversations, like being able to, like how you said, like have the like comfortable conversations that y'all have in y'all's classes. I still have yet to have a Black professor at Texas State, and I'm about to graduate in August, so that's kind of sad for me.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of sad for me. So I really wish I could have had more of that. And, I think that there should just definitely be more representation with the faculty for me.
Thank you. Hannah.
For me personally, honestly, I was going to say the same thing as Christella just did, just having a lot of Black faculty and Black professors. Unlike Christella, I did have one Black professor, but it was Dr. Johnson. He's not even—
Who left?
Yeah. So I feel like it's important also from like a mentor standpoint. So like, I mean, I had Dr. Johnson, but
he was such a good mentor too. He's fantastic.
He was, and it's so important to have like mentors like that, and have people like Christella said that that look like you, and you can kind of have like that representation around campus, and to understand like your perspective. So like I mentioned before that like I've been in like history classes where it was just like the entirety of the classroom was like white. And then also you have like a white professor on top of that. So it's just like helping to feel like more comfortable, like helping in that environmental sense. And besides that, also echoing what I mentioned earlier and what Jane previously said. So just listening to students and the importance of listening, like that's not just something that other non-Black students should be doing, but also like the administration at Texas State as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Dr. Johnson's old office. You should come by and say hello, Hannah.
Oh, I will.
Kim.
Kind of going off of what has been said already, I think listening is really important. You know, we just did an almost hour-long discussion on the importance of having Black faculty. And, you know, like we talked ad nauseum about this discussion. You can hear from, you know, Cree, Evan, Dr. Fluker, Dr. Morton, like why this stuff is important. And even furthermore, they had answers. Like Dr. Fluker detailed how these changes can be implemented in a plausible way. It's not fantasy. It's just a matter of taking initiative and taking action. And I know that I'm not in the position where I can, you know, account for a bunch of Black students, but there are people who, you know, have that opportunity. And if you have the answers and you listen and you see how important it is, then there really is no excuse. So that's my answer.
Erica.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question? I feel like I've gotten off track as everyone was talking.
What would you say to administrators that they could do to make the campus more welcoming to Black students?
Okay. I think listening, like everyone has said, is definitely an important start, and that's what's gonna kickstart everything. But also, like, what are you gonna do with what you're told? Like, what are you gonna do about what we're saying? Because listening, we've been listened to. I guess, you know, not really, but, you know, people can listen all the time, but it's like, what are you going to actually do? And your actions are always going to speak louder than your words. We've seen that with everything, including police brutality and things like that. So I think, yeah, taking the next step to actually and, you know, sometimes like Jaden was saying, like you as a student have a meeting or some type of like interaction with an advisor or an administrator, and you feel like you are even more confused and even more without answers than you were when you walked in. So I feel like not only like listening and then trying to like doing something about it, but also just advocating for us, because at the end of the day, we can only do so much as students. We can only be taken so seriously. So I feel like our professors, and, you know, if they see that passion behind what we're saying, like, why not try and help us, like straight up, just help us. And also, I feel really bad for you, Christella, because I had Dr. Fluker. She was my first ever professor here. And I also had Dr. Gondo for social media, strategic analysis and stuff. And I don't know if I would feel the same way about Texas State in my experience as a whole if I hadn't had Black professors, because growing up, I didn't have Black teachers at all. So I feel like they've actually helped me. They've been people who I feel comfortable talking to. So I think that hiring more African-American and professors and administrators of color is needed. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Well, I am over time, and Jaden's probably gonna, I'm sorry. Anyway, I really appreciate what everyone had to say. And those of you who still have time, you can take one of my classes. And Jaden, I will see you tomorrow in class.
Yes, indeed.
The other thing I want to ask, and this is personal, is Tiff Street's going to return to giving us cookies when the University Star comes out? I missed that.
Look, I'm not going to be here to manage that, but word on the street is that they're working on it. So I think my sources tell me that it's a possibility this upcoming semester. That's what my sources say, though. But,
yeah. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. And I appreciate you all sharing your stories, and I hope to see you on campus or in one of my classes.
Dr. Goldstone, thanks so much. We appreciate you. And thank you to all of our STAR staff members here. And we appreciate it. And really, you know, a major thank you to all of our attendees who you know, signed up for this. You know, I guess start dating back to a couple of weeks ago when we started promoting the event. It's been an utmost honor to you know, spend this last year really working on this project. I've been at the Star for the greater part of over 3 years, and easily, with no hesitation, I can say this is arguably the most rewarding, thing that I've ever worked on, and really giving me a sense of purpose when it comes to how we approach the journalism and the importance of the work. So, I thank you all, for attending. I want to thank all of our speakers in the first session. Kim Davis Jr., podcast editor, Dr. Lori Fluker, Dr. Vincent Morton, Evan Bookman, Creed Taylor, and then certainly here, Dr. Goldstone, Christella Jones, Kim Davis again, Hannah Thompson, and Erica Thompson. Thank you all so much. And all of our people who helped us bring the intermissions to life, from our poets to, singing the Black National Anthem. This is recorded, so we will put this up on the YouTube page to recap, but we just thank everybody for attending this. And thank you all so much. And without further ado, we're gonna close the event out with a special video from our staff. So if you wanna watch it, you can stick around, but this will be the last thing. And once the video closes, we will end the webinar. But thank you all so much for supporting. Again, I dropped the links to the 11% stories in the entire project, where you can find it in the chat, also along with the 11% merchandise. But thank you all for such a wonderful journey. We view this as the start, right? This isn't the end. We're not done covering Black students, right? I graduate, but we really set a foundation this year to really push forward and serve this community in the way it needs and the way it deserves to be served. So thank you all so much. And without further ado, here is a video from our staff members talking about the 11% project. But thank you all so much. We appreciate you and we love you. Thank you. Texas State's, Black students have experienced, so much trial and tribulation during their years on campus, especially in recent years. So in a nutshell, I really wanted the 11% to serve as a lesson for our staff, to know what it's like to be consistent, right? To what we do, what we call babysit the beat, to show up, and continue to work on the same thing over time, right? And see the value of it, right? And doing things with a purpose. And I think, with the 11% project, in some regard, right? Are we where I think we can be? No. But do I think that, some staff members have benefited from this process? And to know, do I think staff members have taken value away from this process? I do think so. I just hope that the 11% project is a foundation moving forward.
So I think it was important for the Star to do this project because for the longest, whenever we wanted to do stories on Black students, they were kind of hesitant to talk to us, for various reasons. And I just feel like this project really showed the Black community that we really wanted to just give them an opportunity to share their stories. And I think, this was like the first time that we really gotten that opportunity to do so. And so I think by doing that, we really kind of started a relationship with the Black community. And I think that's super important, especially just in journalism, just to create these relationships with different communities. So I'm really happy with the way the project turned out and how many students we were able to represent and how many stories we were able to tell with this project.
Because we talk a lot about providing information to our community and just being a resource for our community, but our community does include Black and Brown students. So I feel that, honestly, I feel like we were obligated. We kind of owed them, an analysis like this of Black students through these different aspects, because we talk there's always stories about, I don't want to say white people, but we always talk about white people. And I don't know, I feel like Black people just kind of deserved that, especially after, things that have been going on in recent climate. I just think it was kind of necessary.
Not only did I learn a lot more about the students at Texas State, I got to know their stories more intimately, through the different segments, through different things that we put up every month. I got to know the stories of just certain students here, and I got to know a little bit more about the history of Black students at Texas State. It was a really, really informative and just eye-opening project to take on.
doing this project, I was not familiar with how many Black organizations that were on campus. So in like reaching out to people and discussing people, it made me have like a better understanding of like how much of the Black community is kind of like tight knit at Texas State and how there's a lot of intersectionality there. And it even made me want to join Black orgs once we get back to being in person.
I transferred here in fall 2019, so I wasn't here for a lot of the things that were mentioned. So I wasn't here for like the Connor Clegg situation. I wasn't here for basically all of the protests that we sort of like went back and looked at. I wasn't there for any of it. So I was very uneducated on how the 11% of Black students here at Texas State like have been treated like historically on this campus. And so doing this project sort of allowed me to learn more about that that I didn't know before.
I feel like my favorite project that we done within the 11% was the audio stories. So I know like as in the project as a whole, there was like something else before that, I believe was the timeline. But before I was a part of the Ed Board, I was like introduced into the 11% project as one of the editors for the audio stories. And it was before I was in the Ed Board. I feel like I said that, but I'm sorry, I'm tired. I think Bianca was the one who asked me to help out and to like edit her section, which was over the election, which is since passed. But I worked with her, Laura, and Lionel. Laura being like, you know, the old opinions editor, and Lionel was also part of news. And it was a really great experience because I got to hear like how people from other sections kind of like conducted interviews and learning from someone who was a part of opinions and someone else who was a part of news, and having Bianca's point of view from being the PR director. And then like all that coming into like fruition, coming together through editing and hearing like those different voices and how they were able to like ask certain questions and seeing like the outcomes of that. And really just being able to, I guess, hear the entirety of the interviewees like answers, because like what you hear like at the end of the audio story is just like a snippet of like a whole story. So I guess like I really enjoyed that, being the one to like synthesize those stories so that people, you know, outside the project can like ingest them in like the most, I guess, impactful way. So yeah, and I guess I really enjoyed like the subject matter too, of it being like the elections and seeing, like I mentioned before, like different people's point of view. Like overall, I believe like there was a lot of like similarities popping up, but like the rationale behind like each one being different, because like I mentioned before, everyone goes through different experiences.
I think my favorite part would definitely be talking to people that had like experienced things in the past at Texas State, because I personally wasn't there. So I think it was cool to like get to talk to someone that has experienced it and like was going through what I was going through and like walk the same halls I'm walking, or walk the same walls I was walking, you know, and kind of just like their experience compared to mine, and how it's just like changed since then. I think like my biggest example would be with Tafari. He gave us like some really great, like, you know, in-depth content of what was going on. So it was really cool to hear from him and just like, I guess like hear the whole story, like from beginning to end from someone who saw it like firsthand. So yeah.
We reached out to a lot of students. We reached out to as many people as we could, and we had people fill out forms and all of that stuff. And I think that just in representing the students themselves, I think it was a pretty job well done. Just putting everything into perspective and getting their voices out there and getting their stories out there. I think that, you know, it was very informative, and it's a historic thing to have on the website now. It's a historic project to have out now, and I think that it was a really amazing job done.
Yeah, we did do a good job. I think for me personally, I feel like I'm super proud of what we've done. Like I mentioned before, and I talk about it all the time, especially to Jaden, but especially those audio stories. I feel like those turned out so well. And I know like how stressful it was to put them together, especially being like the first group to have to like publish it. And like for me personally, like I had to edit it twice because the first time like audition crashed and then I had to like start over. So it's just like overcoming like all of those different stuff. Every single time we've done a project, actually like having to overcome like a ton of hurdles and to get it done and then for it to like come out really good in my opinion and to help like, you know, effectively tell everyone's stories who we had like the honor of interviewing. I feel like it went really well and I'm proud of like all the work that we've done because it wasn't easy.
You know, I think I'm really proud of the work that we've done with the 11% project. I know like it really wasn't an easy thing to do because we knew like the importance of it. And there was like so many times where like we just like were so tired on top of like doing this big project and also just keeping up with, you know, our daily reporting on the news and like things going on in the local area. And I just feel like we've like done so much and we've like learned a lot of new skills with this project and learned a lot about like the people that are at Texas State. So I'm just like super grateful to even have been able to work on this project. And yeah, I think we did like a really good job. It wasn't perfect, obviously. Like, you know, like we've made some mistakes along the way. And like, obviously, like if we had more resources or time, like maybe we would have done some things differently. But I think just overall from, you know, each portion of the project to the social media pages that we created for the project to just like the impact that it's had on the community, it's been really special to see and I'm really proud of it.